Let's talk a little bit more about Jen Soto and what the parents thought of her, because I felt like they were the parents of Stefan. They I don't want to say they were excusing their son's behavior, but they seem to have a lot of, well, she's in on this too
Yeah.
type attitude, and kind of, in some cases literally making some excuses for their son of, well, because of this, this is what's going on, that he's the fall guy. I think they said in there, saying, quote, he's feeling remorse over the inappropriate relationship, he's falling on the sword for Jen. That's a weird statement to make.
Yeah.
It's like admitting and accepting that your son is probably raping a child, but then somehow turning that around, like, oh, he's taking the fall for it. He should take the fall for it.
Yeah,
He's the
he
one who
should.
did it.
Yeah.
Um, that I found bizarre.
Yeah, a little bit of a defense mechanism, I think, kicking in for them. Mom said at one point also, and I think again you hear this from parents, "Oh, well, he is very intelligent." I don't think anybody can say he's really intelligent. He's never been really intelligent, but what he is manipulative.
Mhm.
And often parents feel better, well, he's genetically our offspring. We're having trouble accepting this full picture about how bad he is.
What did you glean from the parents at all on how, how they raised him? I mean, I found it interesting how quickly they were to throw him under the bus along
Yeah.
with Jen, which I say bravo. I mean, they're calling a spade, and they're not. I mean, there
Yeah.
was, like I said, we just talked about some little inconsistencies there, but
Yeah.
for the most part, they were just like, he's kind of a loser. It's like he locks
Yeah.
himself in his room all the time. He has no motivation. If he's short on funds, we have to send him money. But he keeps ordering stuff. Just they really just let him. The police have it. Like, yeah, he's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But with that attitude, that quickness to dismiss, that quickness to really, almost like put him down to the authorities. Granted, there's horrible accusations against him, but it does make me wonder, before all of this stuff started, what were they like as parents to
Yeah.
this person before they knew that he was doing these things?
Yeah. This would be a really challenging, as a child, a really challenging kid to raise and to know what to do with. Even though he had special ed services in school, he probably could have benefited from a lot more services than he was getting. And who knows if they were even available back then.
Sure.
But I imagine that they struggled knowing what to do with him throughout his entire life.
Mhm.
And again, by the time he was 14, 15 years old, his sexuality was off in the direction it went. And there was probably not a lot they could do. And then as an adult, of course, he wasn't functional.
Mhm.
And so they kept giving him money, which probably was not helping, the situation, just to let him continue to live this really aberrant lifestyle. So I had some empathy for them because I imagine that they were pulling their hair out when he was 10, 11, 12,
Yeah.
15 years old and just didn't have resources to know how do we handle him.
Yeah, I mean, they seem like a very pragmatic couple in the way that they talk about
Mm.
things and handle things, but then had a child that was anything but,
Yeah.
just in his own world. And I think we see this quite a bit in society, where there's one of the kids or the only kid that, is just not. It's not like either parent in any way, shape, or
Yeah.
form, and not like the rest of society. And you're like, what the hell do I do here?
Yeah.
I mean,
They don't know.
how
Mhm.
do you parent something or someone like that, when that's the cards you've been dealt?
Yeah, it's really hard. And again, different communities have different levels of resources. This is, I see sometimes kids at 7, 8, 9 years old, if they have parents who are insightful, often, professional level parents who have more money, they get them tutors. They give them lots and lots of structure. They give them all kinds of behavioral therapies to try to direct them in more productive ways. And that probably does save some kids. But there's also a tendency with, let's just say, your average normal family who they don't have training in what do you do with a kid like
Mhm.
this. They get so used to it. In some ways, they kind of minimize it and they just keep their fingers crossed. Oh, he's going to grow out of it. Eventually,
Mhm.
there'll be something that happens that turns him into a fairly normal person. And they're hopeful,
Mhm.
which we like to be hopeful about, people. But sometimes their hope is unrealistic, and he needed just a lot more structure than probably a regular family was able to give him.
I mean, with when you have an adult child like this, is it wise to I guess, in some ways you look at the guy and go, he's not capable of handling anything. So they just keep giving him money and money and money and just kind of
Yeah,
keep enabling that. Is that always the right thing to do? I mean, is that even the right thing to do with someone like this? I mean, because I can imagine someone looking at this going, well, so and so's doing it, but the kid just like lost their job or something, or there was something that
right.
happened. And it's like, well, I'll help you out right now. This is just an endless cycle. Like they'll be supporting this
Exactly.
guy, if he was not doing these things, probably till he's dead. Eventually, probably
Yeah.
move back in with them, and then they'd
Yeah.
be, he'd be their caregiver.
Yeah.
What do you do in that? Do you just let them go and crash and burn? Or I don't know what else, because I'm sure there's a lot of parents that wonder about that. Like, do I let them continue to try and hit rock bottom, but knowing
Yeah.
full well rock bottom is probably their norm?
Yeah, and this would be a guy that you can see very easily with the deficits that he had ending up in the homeless community just
Hmm.
chronically. And I'm sure on some level they cared about him. They didn't want to see that happen, but is just throwing money at a situation like this helping? No, and it's a really fine line for people. How do you demand some degree of accountability? That they do some of the right things
Hmm.
before you give them funds. And
Yeah.
that's a tough road for people to know. To what degree do we help? And to what degree do we say, maybe they didn't need to be paying his cell phone bills.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm assuming he had help getting vehicles,
Hmm.
and parents need to not just give money because that's enabling. They need to hold the person accountable in some way. But yeah, none of us want to see our kids grow up and go into the homeless world.
Sure, sure. One of the other disturbing parts of it was, I mean, the fact this guy worked at Disney. Even and
Mm,
Jen worked at Disney too.
yeah.
Um, Obviously, you can't predict certain things, but I mean, should there be more stringent psychological testing done of prospective employees that are going to be working with kids? And of course, there's no allegations here right now that he did anything with anybody at Disney. Hope to God that there isn't.
Yeah.
But I mean, they've had issues before where they've done mass firings and arrests of people within their organization that are out there in the parks working with kids. I mean, is there any way for a business like that works with kids to kind of get ahead of the curve on this and something psychologically go, this is just a risk. We don't have any evidence, but there's something not right.
I think certainly it would be within the law to do a really thorough background check on
Mhm.
everybody. And I have a feeling if we tried to do any kind of psych test before hiring them, I mean, I know nuclear power plants do that,
Yes.
fortunately, but the police force ought to do that too. And I
Yes.
think you're right. Technically, people who work with kids or want to become scout leaders, we should really be looking at them closely. But I have a feeling somebody would come up and say, you're violating people's civil rights. You can't do that.
Yeah.
But would I vote for it? Yeah, I
Yeah.
would.
Yeah, I agree. You're going to have that sort of a pushback, but is it what does it hurt? It's like if it
Right,
comes up
right.
and it's you're protecting children, you're violating those children's civil rights by putting a potential predator if their boxes check of this person is probably high risk based on these other factors.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
we know that predators are attracted to, situations where they're gonna be around kids.
Which naturally then you'd have a lot of them applying at a place like Disney. So it feels like you need to do that. You need to weed them out a little bit better than if they're just going to work at Home Depot or something.
Exactly.
It's a
Yeah.
different dynamic. Fascinating. Listen with that. If anybody wants to hear it, it is on our feed and on the podcast and on YouTube. The interview with Stephan Stern's parents. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.